Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Get Connected in the age of COVID. We are doing this virtually, which is not the way that Get Connected typically connects, but this is a great way for us to learn and to get information. And we have an amazing panel tonight. This is Small Business Month, and every year for the last 7 years, Eastern Bank has supported and sponsored our May event. And this year, we actually are doing two. We did our CEO series that ended last night, and we kicked it off with Quincy Miller from Eastern Bank, and we are closing out the month with Bob Rivers from Eastern Bank. So all things begin and end with Eastern. And for those of you who are new to Get Connected is Boston's premier inclusive networking event. We bring together business and civic leaders for connections to basically create a more inclusive Boston and to break down barriers and ensure that people can get to know each other in a safe space and environment. We kicked off Get Connected 12 years ago as a social impact venture, and we are 12 years in and still going strong. And I am delighted that so many of you have continued to support Get Connected. I am also excited tonight because we have several of our partners, our community and corporate partners, Eastern Bank, the Mass Growth Capital Corporation, our affinity partners, Amplify Latinx, and BECMA, the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. And of course, we are always engaged with the City of Boston. And so we have the City of Boston here tonight. And we are going to talk about small business, recovery and resilience from moving from adversity to opportunity. And how do we pivot? But first, let me tell you a little about these wonderful panelists and our special guest, which is Bob. I'm going to start with Bob because Bob is a founding corporate partner of Get Connected. And perhaps, I am sure for those of you who know Bob will agree that there is no other corporate leader, business leader in Boston who is more active and is a bigger advocate and champion for diversity, equity, and inclusion than Bob Rivers. I mean, he's such a big advocate that we actually Get Connected honored him not once, not twice, but 3 times. And the last time we honored him, he was 6 years ago as one of the white male diversity, equity, and inclusion allies, better known as white men who can jump. So Bob, thank you for all that you do for the City of Boston. He is the chairman and CEO of Eastern Bank. And next up, I'm going to go to Daryl. Daryl Settles is a serial entrepreneur. He started off working in the tech field, digital, many moons ago. And I hate to tell them, Daryl, how long we have known each other. Probably like 3 decades when we were 10 years old.
Right.
And Daryl is just a huge champion advocate for minority-owned businesses, and he has started several social impact and events in Boston. First up, he started Beantown. For those of you who have been to the annual Beantown Jazz Festival, that was founded by Daryl. Then after in 2015, when that just unbelievable, startling report came out from the feds about Boston and the inequity, he started a series called Boston. Tell me, Daryl.
Means business. Boston means business.
Boston means business. Yes, I went to all of them, and they brought together mostly Black entrepreneurs and business leaders, along with some of Boston's white business leaders, to really talk about what we can do to move the dial and the needle for growing and helping to scale Black-owned businesses. And he also is a co-founder of the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts. I almost said New England. Maybe you should think New England, Daryl. And that's been at the forefront of our COVID crisis, particularly for Black and brown businesses. And thank you, Daryl, for all that you do. And even though people might know you from Daryl's Corner Bar and restaurant, you really are into D Ventures, which is a real estate investment and development company. So as I told you, serial entrepreneur. Our next person up is Betty Francisco. Did Betty disappear? There she is. And Betty is just a fierce, fierce advocate for women, for people of color, and she is an angel investor. She's also the co-founder of the Latina Circle, which is a group of Latina women in the C-suite, and as a support and group to really lift up and showcase Latina women. And she is also the co-founder of Amplify Latinx. And they have been a great partner of Get Connected. And she has been at the forefront of the COVID crisis, working with Beckmer, Eastern Bank, and a number of other organizations. And we will hear more about what Betty's doing. And our third panelist, or maybe it's the fourth, is Larry Andrews. Larry is the president and CEO of Mass Growth Capital Corporation, which was a fund created by Governor Deval Patrick to really help small businesses, particularly businesses that are in what we refer to as gateway cities and towns across the Commonwealth. And the added advantage of Mass Growth Capital is they tend to work with companies that are not necessarily able to get traditional funding from banks, but they also work with banks, and they become sort of the middle person working to grow and scale these businesses. And they also give technical support to small businesses and help them grow and become healthy and productive businesses throughout the Commonwealth. And last but by no means least is another fierce woman, Natalia Iturbe, who is the head of the Small Business Office for the City of Boston. And boy, has she been a busy woman in the last 8 weeks and have done some amazing things, particularly around the Resilient Fund and working with small business and micro businesses to make sure that these businesses can survive and thrive in the age of COVID. So we have an amazing panel, and we are going to get started right now, and I'm going to jump right into this. And the first question I'm going to turn this over to is Daryl. Daryl, I know you're prepared. Black and Latino and Latinx, rather, businesses have really been hit hard by COVID. And I'm wondering if you can talk to us about the impact this pandemic has had on small business, particularly, as I said, Black and Latinx. And what do you think the business, civic, and political leaders can and should be doing to ensure that these companies, particularly those that are established companies and a few legacy companies, really are able to survive and thrive and stay afloat?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure everyone knows that more than 90% of all businesses have been impacted from this, especially the smaller businesses, and more than 50% are actually closed. I hope that what comes out of this pandemic situation is the highlight of how small the minority businesses are. This is one of the things that we always like to have as the elephant in the room, but never really want to talk about. And they're so small that when there's a big impact and a big push, it causes major hardships. So I think coming out of this, in terms of you say, what can corporations do in the federal government? I think we have to really focus on how do we scale minority businesses. More than 80% of our businesses have 0 employees. They're individual entities. So let's be real and call them what they are. They're means to an end, and they're making money to survive, but they're not creating wealth, and they're not hiring other individuals. And that's what we need in our community. I think we're going to have a major impact, and I'm sure Bob will talk about this later and others. There are a lot of jobs that are not going to come back. You see a lot of positive things that say that, oh, we're going to recover in the next 3 to 6 months. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in a big way. So, I've been involved in a lot of businesses, and if I look at just the hotel market and also the restaurant community, those are operations that we loved attending and going to and hanging out and seeing our friends and socializing, and that can happen now. You can't have large individuals or large groups together. And that's not going to change in 2 months or 3 months. You heard the governor say the other day that we're probably going to be wearing masks for up to a year. So you think about restaurants, we always think about the larger restaurants. And so we're talking about the ones that have, capacity of 200, 1 or 2 large bars. But the typical restaurant is less than 100 seats. So if now you're going to a smaller amount, for example, you're not going to have a packed bar anymore. That's out the window. So now you're talking a person who has a bar that can hold 20 to 30 is now down to 5 to 10. In terms of seating, it's got to be spread it out. There was a big article, not a big article, the article in the Globe yesterday about a march, and it was in front of Steve DeFilippo's restaurant in Park Plaza, talking about reopening. It's going to be a slow reopening for a lot of the smaller businesses. We're typically in the service businesses. So we're the essential workers, people where you have to actually work in order to make money. The last point I'm going to say is, there's been I think the government has done a decent job of providing stimulus money, but that money is going to run out. So, it's great that it's going to go from 8 weeks in terms of paying it back. In order to get it paid back to perhaps 26 weeks. That's going to be a big help. But if jobs don't come back for 6 to 12 months, then what happens when that stimulus money is not there and you're not able to find a job?
Thank you, Daryl. I want to encourage everyone, if you have questions that you would like to ask our panel, please use the Q&A area, chat, to send us your question. I'm going to pivot to Bob Rivers, because there are things that you said, Daryl, that really, I think, plays right into some of the work that Bob has been doing with the Business Equity Initiative Fund that he created. And I think that fund really was, came out of that same study, and Bob participating in the Boston Mean Business and coming to a lot of Get Connected events and meeting lots of small business owners. And as the #1 small business bank, I think what I love about Bob, what you do, is everybody always talk about, we want to do a study, we need to do a study. You didn't need to do a study to recognize that this huge wealth gap is never going to be able to be closed unless we are able to help scale, as Daryl said, businesses that are already out there and established. And we think about how some of these business, all of us, including my own, we grow to a certain level and then we are undercapitalized and we can't sort of scale. So tell us how you came about with BEI, and how is that responding today, and how many cohorts you have created so far in this program.
Sure, Colette, and thanks for the kind introduction, and thanks for the opportunity to participate in this. So we launched something called the Foundation for Business Equity back 3 years ago. It was really inspired by the Federal Reserve's Color of Money report, which observed the now infamous, but still surprisingly not well-known statistic that white households here in Boston have an average net worth of $250,000 versus Black households of $8, and versus that of Latinx households, which are about $2,000. So the gaps are enormous. Particularly with respect to those communities. We established the Foundation for Business Equity to really fund 3 things. One is, Colette, as you mentioned, the Business Equity Initiative, which is an intensive advisor-based program, works one-to-one with businesses over a period of 12 to 18 months. We've now launched 5 cohorts of 10 businesses each, so 50 businesses, designed to scale those businesses. Those businesses are exclusively at this point Black and Latinx businesses, because again, that's where the wealth gap is concentrated, not only here in our community locally, but nationwide. We also use the money to fund a program at the Chamber to drive large contracts from larger businesses called the Paysetter program, and also seed funded the Business Equity Fund at the Boston Foundation. And all credit to my colleague, Glenn Lloyd, who I think many of you probably know, who we hired early on as the executive director of this effort, whose experience as a successful founder, business owner, someone who's worked in this space before with Boston Impact Initiative. He was just perfect for this and has done an amazing job. And that work continues to evolve in a number of ways post-crisis. I couldn't agree with Daryl more. That the need to scale minority businesses has always been there. It becomes even more pressing now because, you know, we just look around, and those of us in the community know that our Black and brown businesses are getting devastated right now. Small businesses all over are feeling the pain because they don't have much in the way of their own resources to survive something like this. But again, our minority business enterprises are on average significantly smaller than the average small business here in our marketplace. So have even less resources. And worse yet, are concentrated in sectors that are being hit hardest. whether they be the restaurant business, food service, hair care, other retail businesses that have been shut down for long periods and to this point indefinitely. Those businesses are particularly being hard hit. So really, FBE, the Foundation for Business Equity, was a launch point. It really came from conversations that I'd had with Colette early on, with Daryl and Boston Means Business. Daryl was a big influence on our thinking about how to direct this program. And I'm so proud to be on this panel because there has a number of co-conspirators and collaborators here. In addition to Colette and Daryl, Larry sits on the Foundation for Business Equity's Advisory Council. Betty, through Amplify Latinx, along with BECMA, myself and Steve Grossman, have been advocating for how stimulus funds at this time, whether it be the Paycheck Protection Program or other things, can be better directed to support minority businesses, because once again, they were overlooked, ignored, and even within those programs designed to help as many people as possible, there are structural disparities built into those programs that once again left our minority business enterprises behind. So long way around to say this has been a problem for a long time. The problem just got worse. It needs more resources than ever in all ways. And thankfully, there are a number of us working on these things and other things, but God, we need more. We need more support from our government. We need more support from the business community at broad scale. And I'm hopeful in this moment of crisis that this recognition will finally take hold in a substantive way, and we'll actually start making progress on something that's been a black eye for Boston for a very long time.
Colette, one other thing to put this in perspective, the definition from the federal government of a small business is less than 500 employees. And I mentioned earlier that more than 80% of minority businesses have 0 employees.
True. Very true. I'm going to turn this to Natalia because Bob talked about, business and government. And I know that the city has raised over $37 million for its COVID Resilient Fund, and you have disbursed significant amount of dollars to small businesses. So I'm wondering, Natalia, if you could tell us more about the this Resilient Fund. Is it overtapped? Has it been tapped out? And what are some of the ways that people who are on this webinar, if they are working and doing business in Boston, can take advantage of that, or has it been shut down, closed out?
Thank you so much, Colette. First of all, just thank you for having me. What an incredible panel. It's always nice to see familiar faces, but people really on the ground doing tremendous work. So thank you for bringing up the Boston Resiliency Fund. So there's a couple of different funds out there, and I just want to clarify so that I don't set the wrong expectation. So the first fund that you mentioned is the Boston Resiliency Fund, which is at about $30.9 million at this point. That was initiated by the mayor, and it was really designed to help the most vulnerable populations with different things like food, protective equipment, etc. BPS, Chromebooks, etc. So that's the Boston Resiliency Fund. It's still going strong. I think we give out probably, well, I don't even know the total amounts, but grants are given out every single week to nonprofits who are working with the city on executing those funds. one fund that we put out in the small business team in the Office of Economic Development is we put together the Small Business Resiliency Fund, which I think is what you were talking about. And so this fund was really designed to help small businesses with small infusions of cash directly to small businesses in the city of Boston who were impacted most severely by the COVID pandemic. So you have to realize that we put that fund out in the beginning of April, only knowing what we knew in April, right? And so I think, you know, as we have been giving out these funds every single week, we're at over 1,000 businesses that have received funds. We're almost at I think we're about 1,200 businesses that have received these funds. You know, we continue to evolve in that process. I think for us, what's been really important from the very beginning is that we've been talking to businesses. We put out surveys, and all of the things that we've heard, all of the trends that we've really learned and understood from businesses is what we're using to guide kind of the city's small business efforts. So after we saw the governor's guidance around reopening, we immediately knew that there would be a lot of hand-holding, a lot of information sessions. We would need to be putting together a lot of information to help businesses with this kind of next phase. So as you know, as the situation changes, as more information comes out about what people need to be doing in this current state, the city's reacting to that. So we'll be doing workshops and trainings for small businesses, both kind of general trainings, but then industry specific trainings. We also know that the digital divide is huge. And so, you know, we're helping businesses get online. But I want to mention that the mayor announced yesterday a new fund called Reopen Boston Fund. And this pool of money is really designed to help businesses, our smallest businesses, folks who are in direct physical contact with their customers. So think, you know, barbershops, hair salons, help them do everything that they can to reopen safely and in a healthy way. So really thinking about those barriers, PPE, what types of things do folks need to go to extend their businesses outside, like restaurants. And so we are adapting our response as we learn more and as, you know, the time changes, because I think that if we were doing everything like how we were in April, you know, I think we would be shooting the wrong shot. So I think for us, it's really about listening to small businesses, understanding what small businesses need, and ensuring that they know how to connect with us and how to connect with these resources. Because I think that's one of the biggest disconnects in the work that we do is sometimes we're talking to the same rooms over and over, even if we're moving from room to room, right? We're talking to the same people. And so what I, you know, want to emphasize is that you know, small business owners are busy, right? They are, as Daryl mentioned a couple of times, these are individual business owners. They don't have employees. They tend to be tapped out. So how do we ensure that we are supporting them in the ways that they need? And how do they know what the city and other partners are doing in order to access those resources? So that's really where our focus has been from the very beginning, is just really listening and reacting to what folks are telling us that they need.
So Betty, thank you very much, Natalia. You are a angel investor among many hats that you wear, among the many hats you wear. And as both Bob and Daryl have pointed out, that there just is still a lack of funding. And I am wondering if you can speak to what can angel investors and equity firms do to really support minority-owned businesses, some of whom were all set to launch, and now, you know, they're like stymied because they don't have they don't have employees per se, and they have now invested all of their effort, energy, time for maybe a year working on this specific venture, and now they can't failure to launch. So what can angel investors do and private equity companies to support these businesses?
Sure. Well, again, want to also thank you, Colette, for organizing this conversation. And again, back with some friends that I've actually had some conversations with today. So today is like the party day, I suppose. So, you know, in terms of the angels in particular, I mean, there's sort of three tiers, right? When we talk about this, the range of equity capital. So there's the angel investors, which are individual investors that invest in very early stage companies. There's venture capital, right? And that, which is growth capital, and then private equity, which is like truly scale, you know, mezzanine capital. And so, you know, I'm at the beginning tier. And, you know, I think a lot of angel investors are starting, you know, not only continuing to support their existing investments, but also looking at new opportunities and investing in businesses owned by people of color. Honestly, this is the best time to do it, because these are the most impacted communities, right? And there are innovations coming out to address some of the issues you're seeing, right? So everything from, you know, fintech products geared to, say, the Latino community, to, you know, health, telehealth, right? Types of companies. We're seeing all kinds of innovations happening, and many of them are being started by entrepreneurs of color, but with a focus on communities of color, which have always been left behind, but they're the largest demographic, right, in the country right now, when you look at, you know, the market opportunity. So because it's been so ignored for so long, if you're a smart investor, you're looking at where is the biggest bang for your buck, right? And that's where it is. And not only that, but there is data showing that, you know, at least on the equity side, investments in companies that are led by entrepreneurs of color deliver greater returns. There is, you know, emerging data. And so I think this is a demographic to look at, not just for the sake of them being people of color, but the types of companies that they're launching, right? Because they're addressing real social needs, or they're opening up new market opportunities that haven't been there before. You know, the other thing I would say on the venture side too, right? This is the time to look at, you know, where are the changes happening, the companies that have been pivoting, right? Again, when you look at how we've all had to like retreat, right, into our homes, digital technologies have become, you know, the term du jour, right? It's things like Zoom, things that create access to remote workers. It's in the healthcare sector, all technology driven, right? And innovations are happening faster than ever. Things that typically could take a year to create are being done in 2 weeks, right? Because of the need. And so what it's showing is that, you know, even what we're investing in, companies that know how to partner well, know how to collaborate across sectors really well, are the ones that are most interesting to investors right now.
Well, if I were close to you, Betty, I'd give you a hug despite social distancing, because I'm working on a venture that I think is you're so spot on with that. Having been to Israel, which is considered startup nation, I will tell you that most minority-owned ventures are typically social impact ventures. They are ventures that are really about solving problems. And these are, when you look at the future, this is where the future is going to go. I'm going to go to Larry. Larry, last but not least, I want you to talk about Mass Growth Capital. And you, at the beginning of COVID and the beginning of this crisis, you announced a $10 million fund that sort of disappeared within a couple of weeks. There was just so much demand. And I want to sort of hear from you about some of the ways that you are responding to this and working with small established companies that has growth potential.
Thank you. Thank you, Colette. And again, with the panelists, and it is something that we've had a fair number of different collaborations. And I think that's one thing that is a positive about what's sort of happened is there's been a sort of unification around sort of the inequities that we know are there. Obviously, it's become health inequity, and it is highlighting the economic inequity as well. I have to point out Betty, you know, she talking about angel investors. She's been on the front line on PPP and has been fielding phone calls, and she has become an expert, and just amazing what Betty has done through the Equitable PPP, which came out of Glenn Lloyd in the Business Equity Initiative. Natalia, what's going on in Boston, just an amazing outreach and just, I think, a model for small businesses. And then Daryl, my friend Daryl, and what has happened at BECMA, and Shogun has been an amazing voice. And as we look at sort of what that inequity is, you know, the German theologian Martin Luther said that we're responsible for our words, and we're also responsible for what we don't say. And I would not feel well if I did not say this, but when we talk about George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Sandra Bland, Sean Reed, Tamir Rice, Eric Gardner, Oscar Evans, Michael Brown, and the list goes on. You know, you cannot watch those videos of last night without being affected. And I just want to say, this is personal, that, you know, to my family of color, I'm sad, I'm ashamed, I'm angry, I'm furious, actually, and I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Really sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry.
Larry, I know that was very, very heartfelt, and that was actually one of the questions that I had in mind that I was going to ask both those of color on the panel and our two white allies, you know, about what is it that white people and white men in particular can do to really be supportive of people of color and minority-owned businesses. Bob, do you want to take that? Or?
Sure. I mean, I think the first thing is you know, understand that not only do we not have all the answers, we probably don't have any of the answers, frankly. You know, we need to do a better job developing relationships with communities that honor our own, and really listen and understand what the needs are, and given whatever resources we might have, what's the best way to help. I mean, too often, I think a lot of things are cooked up, and we're well-meaning, and they're done by well-meaning individuals, but they're often done in a vacuum. They're often done presuming what the problem is, and often done without enough engagement with those that they're, you know, quote unquote, trying to help. And that was one of the things that we were very mindful of in establishing the Foundation for Business Equity is, although we're, you know, the #1 lender for small businesses in New England for the last decade, and that gives us some level of insight. It certainly doesn't give us enough level of insight when it comes to economic disparities along racial lines. And the only way that we're going to understand those is developing relationships with those who live those lives and walk that walk. And that's why, you know, starting with Glenn Lloyd, why Glenn was so essential to lead the effort, not only because of his own lived experience, but also because of the network that he brings, the network that so many on our board bring, and really making sure that we were casting as wide a net as possible in those communities to breed that insight. And I think that's one of the ways in which what we've built has been as effective as it has been. And one of the lessons when I look at the ways in which it hasn't been effective, ways that it could be more effective if we had done and continue to do a better job of just that.
Thank you. I'm gonna turn to Daryl. Daryl, one of the most significant models that exist out there today is the Massport model for how large corporations and large institutions can really truly engage with minority-owned businesses. And I would love you to talk about how companies can use that model across all industries to really begin to truly have joint ventures and partnership and lift up minority-owned companies and help to scale them and grow them.
Yeah. Thank you. There's a lot can be said for that. I want to thank Tom Glenn, Ken Turner, Dwayne Jackson for coming up with that model. And it's really a model that made a difference in terms of scaling. It invited minority participants to be part of big projects with big numbers. We talked about earlier about most of our businesses being extremely small, and I applaud the effort that goes to that. But if as much energy went to creating avenues of doing business like this model, it could push the dial overnight. Overnight. I'm on the board of the Boston Chamber of Commerce, and you mentioned earlier about Pacesetters.
Mm-hmm.
Pacesetters has been in existence now for 3 years. It probably has about 30 to 40 minority businesses that are part of that program. And Bob, I don't know how many companies we have that are members. 300?
700.
That are the Pacesetters? Well, the Pacesetters.
No, major companies that are members of the chamber.
Oh God, hundreds. Yeah.
Probably about
Yes.
700.
And in 3 years, we have only had an impact of doing $3 million of business. That's disgraceful. If you look at the amount of man hour and the time and the brain power that goes behind putting these initiatives together, if we were able to put that same amount of time and energy to bigger deals, bigger numbers, then we could have a different world, And so in terms of corporations, you can do that when it comes to services, contracts, whether you're using attorneys, you're using architects, you're using construction, general contractors, service providers. I mean, you all have office needs. There are office supply companies that are owned by people of color, using them for your supplies. And giving big contracts. It is a shame, and everyone on this panel has heard my push for the last 3 years, and I tell what it is. I ask people all the time, if you're able to name me 10 minority businesses that do a mere $2 million in revenue per year, I would give you $100,000, and you would be able to cash it. And no one of significance have been able to come up with that with the 10. And there are a lot more than that in Boston, but the point of it is that it should be hundreds of companies of color that are in that boat, and they're not.
Thank you, Daryl. I'm going to go to Betty. Betty, you and Aixa Bichon wrote a powerful op-ed in the Boston Globe. And for those of you who may not have read it, it was really addressing the issue of the inequity within the philanthropic community, and that often organizations that are run by people of color, particularly nonprofits, receive significantly less than their white counterparts. in this age, because I believe that this pandemic gives us a real opportunity to hit the reset button and to really fix the things, the inequities that we see, and all of the things that we have, this light has been shown on for us to see. So I would love to hear from you, Betty. What are some of the things that the philanthropic community, both corporate philanthropy and community foundations and individuals who are generous and supportive, can do to really address this inequity?
So thanks for that, Colette. So, you know, that piece came out of honestly just being angry, right? Being angry at the fact that we all support and or work in nonprofits, and they are, you know, nonprofits led by people of color. We're on the front line serving our community. We know them best, and yet it is so challenging to fundraise, right? Because you may not have the right networks, the right connections. Also, when you're still small, when you're a smaller nonprofit, and you've been in, you know, not connected to the larger mainstream, you're often seen as, you know, well, you're not perhaps good enough. You don't have the scale that you need, right, to really know what you're doing. You can't do good evaluation. So all the things that philanthropy has traditionally focused on, right, we're shut out, especially those smaller nonprofits doing the boots on the ground work. And so that is, you know, why Eeks and I started to write this piece, because, you know, the data is disturbing. This is a report that goes back by Hispanics in Philanthropy, showing that only 2% of philanthropic foundation dollars go to Latino-led nonprofits. And then most recently, it was just this past month, Echoing Green and Bridgespan did another report looking at Black and Latino-led nonprofits, and it showed that Black-led organizations are 45% smaller, right, than their white-led counterparts, and 91% of Black-led organizations have their unrestricted net assets are 91% less than their white-led counterparts. So they're operating, you know, they're doing a lot more with a lot less, and fundraising shouldn't be this difficult, right, when you're serving those most in need. So what can the philanthropic community do? Part of it is, you know, take an equity lens to giving, right, to how we're funding, you know, organizations. Is it based on, you know, the traditional metrics around size, about net assets, about, you know, leadership and impact, or can we look at other metrics around, you know, what is happening in communities? And bigger is not always better, right? Sometimes smaller is better. And so it requires looking at the landscape of who is serving whom. Right, we did a study, which is not released yet, with the Gaston Institute, looking at the Latino nonprofits in Massachusetts. Right, there's about 86 or so across the state. There's not that many. They're highly concentrated in Greater Boston, and their net assets are below, I think it was 150,000. So how do you operate, right, when you're so small? So part of this, the recommendation is to look at scaling up these minority-led nonprofits so that they could serve more, have deeper impact, and open doors, right? So just as we do in the investment world, we often syndicate deals, right? So angel investors look to invest with other angels. Well, let's do that in the philanthropic community, right? Let's get a number of nonprofits to come together, foundations to come together and support nonprofits to build up scale. The other piece is using data, like where are foundations investing in, right? Really knowing who they're giving their money to. And part of it is tracking, you know, they ask you, every foundation today asks, you know, what does your board composition look like, right? Well, let's look inward and look at the foundations, right? And start to do that deep work around racial equity. And then last, you know, because Bob mentioned this, we've been great partners with the Foundation for Business Equity. It is led by Glenn. You know, organizations that are supporting other nonprofits, right? So whether it's the Latino Legacy Fund, FBE, they also need to fundraise. And larger dollars need to go to them so that they can have bigger impact. And yet it's a struggle, right? We have to work 3 times as hard. So again, I think the philanthropic community, foundations in particular, have to start changing their criteria for who they're investing in, and make it a priority to invest in organizations led by people of color.
Thank you. Very good answer. Larry, can you share with our audience what are some of the resources that MGCC has that's available that could be helpful to companies in this time?
Sure. So as Colette talked about in my introduction, you know, we were able to come out with a emergency fund, and you know, very early on, in fact, within the governor announcing it, our website went down, and we realized that that this was a huge need. And in fact, we had to increase our bandwidth on our website 3 times because of the demand for what we had. And within 36 hours, we had over 3,000 applications, and it was just an amazing need that we saw out there. We were able to put out $20 million, but realized that the real need had to be met federally, not from the state, given the really what the demand was. Since then, we've been working on helping out on technical assistance, and we created this stabilization network, which is over 50 TA providers throughout the state, and was involved in the Massachusetts Equitable PPP initiative, which is still ongoing, and again, Amplify Latinx as well as LISC sort of led that charge. And I'd be remiss not to say that PPP is still available, and that's something that every business, if you haven't applied, you should apply. It is obviously the best opportunity if you can. And so, again, there's an opportunity to work with people that have been working with small businesses to apply. If you have questions, I'll give you our website, which is empoweringsmallbusiness.org, empoweringsmallbusiness.org, and there's some links to the Equitable Initiative. And so that's one thing I'd say. The other thing that we have been also doing is we are a micro lender for the SBA. And that's one thing to think about with the SBA is that they are, if you get a new loan, they will pay for 6 months of your interest. And so that not only if it's with the banks, such as Eastern is the largest lender in Massachusetts for small business, SBA will pay for the interest for that loan for 6 months. So it's a real opportunity to continue to look at SBA loans. For our own portfolio, we've for 1 month we actually had no payment. It was all deferred. Actually, it wasn't even deferred. They didn't have to pay at all. And then we're continuing to help out our borrowers with additional deferments. And so we really believe that we're trying to look at ways in which we can help. But right now, and this is one of the things I really want to stress, in the past, you looked at banks, you looked at other sources of equity. There are so many things that are sort of coming online, including the City of Boston and their initiatives. There's other programs that are happening. There are initiatives coming from the federal government on HUD as well as EDA, and all those grants and different lending opportunities. those are probably going to be the best opportunity for a business to at least explore. And we also know that not every business is going to be able to take advantage of that as well. But those are things. So from a capital stack of looking at your business, it's just not banks. It's just not agencies like Mass Growth Capital. There's other things that you have to be sort of attuned to. And again, you can go to our website, empoweringsmallbusiness.org, and there's resources there available. And I would say you don't know it all. We're learning something new every day. And again, the people that are on this panel are great resources. And again, those are people that are available. And one other thing I just want to share is that this is a scary time for businesses. It really is scary. I will say, even for I run a business. It's an agency, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I protect my employees? How do I make a difference with my customers, my clients, and not knowing sort of what the future is. And yet what we do know is, because we're together, because we're all working together, and I look at this panel and I know that I could call up any one of them and say, okay, what do we do for this? Nobody has all the answers. And so you have to network. And that's why Get Connected like this is so important, because you can't do it alone. There's too much to learn. There's so much coming out. So don't be bashful. Make sure that you stay connected. Make sure you connect with these people on this, as well as Colette, because again, survival of your business is really going to depend on a lot of different factors in the going forward.
Thank you, Larry. And I didn't pay him to say that. But that's the essence of Get Connected. I'm going to throw one last question out to Natalia, and then we're going to open it up to see if there are people in our audience who have questions. As people think about reopening, Natalia, what are some of the policies or things that the city has that could be helpful for small business that they can take advantage of?
Thank you. So just to start off, I think the mayor's been really clear, and we're trying to make sure everybody understands that just because you can open doesn't mean you have to. Safety, the health of your businesses, of your employees and of your customers is the number one thing that we need to reemphasize, right? So just because you're allowed to reopen, don't reopen until you're absolutely ready to. I think that is what we're trying to convey to businesses. To do that, I think one of the ways in which we are trying to be helpful is by putting out the Reopen Boston Fund. And helping businesses with grants up to $2,000 to be able to actually put into place those safety measures in order to reopen. I think it would be more detrimental to our economy and to us as to the city of Boston if we have to open and then close again. So I would say that fund. The other thing that I want to mention is that we put out a page on our website for PPE. So business owners know that they need to provide PPE for their employees. They need to have cleaning supplies. They need to have all those materials. And we know that that's going to be a challenge for a lot of folks to be able to access quality PPE. So if you go to boston.gov/business PPE, you will actually see a list of suppliers here that are local. And they have, everything from cloth masks to surgical and, really high grade masks, as well as cleaning supplies listed on there. We worked with BECMA and Segun on getting that list. So we know that we're all partnering to ensure that these are both procurement opportunities for small businesses, but they're also helping connect our businesses to one another, and they're helping our businesses get the necessary materials that they need in order to reopen. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I think another great tool is going to be these workshops. So we've already held 3 workshops so far on different things to think about. So what are the legal implications of reopening your business right now, right? So what do you have to think about when you're, going online for the first time? We'll be doing one on healthy spaces and one on accounting, and thinking about what it looks like for our businesses kind of in this post-COVID or pre-post-COVID world. So we'll continue to adapt and create more resources for small businesses. And like I said, a lot of these ideas have come directly from small businesses and the experience and the expertise that folks have on the ground. So if you have a great idea of what we should be doing to support small businesses, please feel free to email them to us. smallbiz@boston.gov is the easiest way. We are slightly overwhelmed with emails at this moment, so just bear with us while we respond to everyone. But I do think reopening is really, right now, it's really the responsibility of small business owners to ensure that their business, their employees, their customers are safe. And by doing that, I think we will have a better trajectory in the long term.
Thanks. And if I could throw out a little plug for LISC, I know that Karen Kelleher is in the audience, and she's doing a number of workshops and having resources to really help these small businesses. And somebody asked Bob, I think this question is for you. They wanted to know if there is still PPP money, and which is as a small business owner, what is the best bank to go to? And I see that Natalia has given the boston.gov PPE, but she was asking where is the best bank to go to, of course, Eastern Bank, to be helped with PPP.
Well, there's still, I'm trying to remember the number, it's somewhere around 150 billion of PPP monies left. So there's plenty left. Mm-hmm. Again, my suggestion on the best bank to go to is the one that you do business with now. Because again, they're gonna know you, they're gonna have your information. It's the best place to start. That said, there are a lot of banks, Eastern is among them, that are taking applications from non-customers, and we're doing that today. So to the extent that Eastern could be helpful, we'd be happy to take that application also.
And Colette, I'll just put a plug for Larry mentioned it a couple times too, the Massachusetts PPP Equitable Access Initiative, which is providing technical assistance, meaning help to business owners to complete the application. So if you're not sure if you qualify or you want to understand how it works, how forgiveness works, there's a group of technical advisors that can help you do that and help you apply and get access to a number of banks, right, that are taking the applications as well. So I'm going to put the link in the chat.
Okay, somebody.
Colette,
yes.
but before we move on, I just want to thank my colleagues who are on the panel tonight for all the hard work that you guys are putting forth. You guys really, really are making a difference. 2 people that we named earlier, I want to give the biggest shout out to, and that's Glenn Lord and Segun Adui. Those guys are really on the front line. They're doing the bulk of the work. All the advocacy work that's happening, all the collaborations that are happening, these guys are actually making it happen.
No question.
2 other things I want to bring up. Someone asked, what else could be done? We talked briefly about technical assistance, but that's the number one need, technical assistance for the minority businesses. So the closest small business center that we have, it is in Brockton and Salem. Why is there not one here in Boston? Why is there not one here in Boston? We need it here. And the second point I want to make is that this is the time that we, as community activists and people who actually care about the world as a whole, to push both our the Commonwealth and the city of Boston to do more business with people of color. The fact that the last reports that came out said that less than 3% of all the business went to the majority versus sharing it with people of color is disgraceful. That needs to change tomorrow. And people say that there are initiatives that are in place, and I'm here to say that we can no longer wait. We need that to happen now, not 3 months from now, not 6 months from now, not next year. It needs to happen now.
Thank you, Daryl, for that. The urgency, it's the fierce urgency of now. And I will, someone had said about the funding circle. She mentioned that that if you are with one of these big banks, like, I hate to have to call anybody out, but it's in the chat, BOA, that you're better off going to the funding circle for help. And someone asked if they have a podcast that they're trying to get funded or sponsorship for, and they were asking what's the best way to do that. So if there's anyone who want to give some advice, that would be helpful.
I know Betty had responded a little bit to that in the chat, but I think right now there are an incredible amount of online webinars, workshops, trainings. Obviously the city's putting some on, but I think if you are a business owner right now and you are looking to expand and grow your business, I urge you to reach out to your local government, economic development agency. I also think that you can do some searching online and find some incredible resources that are out there. There's so many incredible organizations in Boston doing phenomenal work, one-on-one work. Daryl, I totally hear you on the TA. I think TA is really critical. But business owners need to, right now, especially during this time when there's so much craziness going on, we have to, ensure that you know how to access those resources and that you actually go look for them, because they are out there. I'm on lists and I get, I'm seeing all of the, our private, our nonprofit partners. There's incredible resources out there. I try to push our small businesses out to our partners because there's so much quality work that we don't always need to, duplicate it. We like to partner. So, my recommendation for folks right now is spend this time really well. If you can't be open and you're prepared to open, but also prepared to increase your business. Prepare, get yourself online, figure out, really great tools to expand your business model, because at the end of the day, this new world, we don't even know what's going to happen out there yet. I think I think as everybody on this panel has said, COVID has really shaken up what it is that is possible. And I think because of that, I think you're seeing an incredible amount of generosity and wisdom being shared at a really high level. So, I know that there are colleges, universities, nonprofits doing great workshops out there that I encourage you all to look for. And start with your local governments. We're putting together, just this week alone, we have 6 or 7 different workshops, and they're totally free and public. And even if your business is not in the city of Boston, they're available on our Facebook page. So, you don't have to be connected to us in order to get, benefit from these resources. And not all of them are going to be relevant. Not all of them are going to be right for your business, but there is a way for you to get access to these types of workshops and trainings for you to enhance your business.
As we close out, I'm going to ask everyone if there are any last bit of wisdom that you would like to share or information before we all say goodbye.
It's Betty. I would just say that, this is the way, the folks on this call have come together, but just the larger, community, both businesses, corporations, nonprofits, even, government sector quasis, the collaboration that we're seeing today is unlike anything I've ever seen.
I agree.
And we must continue that, right? Because we know that together we can solve, many of these structural, issues and problems. These are diverse groups coming together, lots of different perspectives, and openness, to including others at the table that, have direct experience in the issues that we're facing. So I would say that collaboration and coalition has to continue. We have to keep building it, and and being advocates each and every day. Like I look, Daryl, you talked about Segun. I am a huge fan because he is a constant advocate, and that is what we have to do, is continue speaking up for our communities and what they're facing, but doing it in coalition and in partnership and in allyship. And I want to thank you, Larry, for what you mentioned earlier, because we need, our allies to really stand up for us right now.
I agree. Thank you, Betty.
I want to say, I want to do a shout out to what Natalia said earlier about, businesses have to take responsibility for taking their own initiative to find some of these resources that are out there, because there are a ton of them that are out there, and there's no question about that. I want to leave with a quote from Abraham Lincoln. He said that the best thing about the future is that it happens one day at a time. I myself am taking 2 intense online courses, and I'm trying to take advantage of the time so that I can get ready, and I just push everyone else to start doing something like that.
Agreed. Bob and Larry?
Yeah, I was just going to say, one of the things that Mass Growth Capital did was we one of the things is not only is we have to be aware of the culture and basically language. And one of the things I think we're starting to see and be more accepted is that access is not only information, but it also has to be in people's languages and also culturally specific. And so as we move forward, no matter what we do, and I think this crisis will move that forward. And I think, when we talk about languages, with our PPP, we translated into 19 different languages, Massachusetts, and that's not all of them. That's just the ones that were sort of on the front burner. And I guess I want to leave with a quote as well. EWF is a very notable think tank, Earth, Wind, and Fire. You're a shining star, no matter who you are, shining bright to see what you can truly be. And I think that's really what we do, is look forward and see what we can truly be in the future.
Well, I should really end it there, because Larry, you're a tough act to follow.
Yeah.
But I will echo what Betty said. Again, I'm seeing a lot of energy, a lot of resources from lots of places. And there are a number of people and organizations getting engaged in these issues that heretofore weren't. And I think that's exciting. And we're going to need a lot more than we have. But I'm very, very encouraged by the energy that I see. And we just have to keep it going and ramp it up.
And I want to thank each of you for really being on the front line, for Larry and Bob for being such great equity, inclusion, and diversity allies, to Betty and Natalia and Daryl for constantly being such amazing champions and advocates for bringing attention to the needs of our community and for supporting our businesses and our nonprofits. And I'm going to close out with an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And that's what we are doing here tonight. We are going together because we want to go far and we know we can go far. So thank everybody. I saw Steve Crosby And I saw Priscilla Douglas and a number of others on here. So thank you all for joining us.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Colette.
Okay. Thank
Thank you.